Well, hello. My name is Vicki Westra, and this is the Shifting Perspective on Autism with Vicki Westra podcast. And I'm so excited today to have a special guest, and that is Becca Lory Hector. And welcome, Becca.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, we appreciate you being here. As I was looking through your information, I'm just going to list just a little bit of your background. I'm sure you could add to it, but you are an autism expert. You're an expert in neurodiversity and inclusion. You're a consultant. You're a public speaker. You're a writer. And you have a lot of acronyms behind your name. So obviously, this is an area where you have created some expertise, correct?
Yeah, and I think it started out of necessity and it became a passion. I received my diagnosis of autism when I was 36 years old.
Okay.
Now about to be 45, and so my diagnosis had a really huge impact on my life, and so I kind of got really involved in the autism community as a result. And autistics just have a way of learning everything we can about what it is that we're interested in. So I don't know, I guess I become an expert just by being me, I guess.
Amazing. That's great. So you developed a passion around the diagnosis. So, but let me find out then, because that's a little bit older to get the diagnosis. And so, what was your childhood like then, up until the point you got the diagnosis?
For me, it was complicated. I was born in the late 70s and raised in the 80s. And at that time, we were very clear, like black and white clear about who was a special needs person and who wasn't. We were very much segregated about that. There was no kind of, you didn't want to touch people with special needs. You could get the cooties, and we put them on separate buses, go to separate schools, right? And so when they were dealing with some of my struggles in school, it didn't fit into that category for them, and it actually didn't fit anywhere. And so what I ended up is with a childhood that I ended up being a really angry teenager, because a lot of adults were telling me there was something wrong or different about me, and they were constantly trying to label it and medicate it. It was never autism. It was always these other things like anxiety and depression, schizophrenia, bipolar, right? And it was all of these other things, because at the time, autism was a very little thing. It was really about white boys who were behavior problems in the classroom and or were non-speaking.
Right.
If you weren't those things, they weren't looking for autism.
Right.
And so as a very quiet girl who read most of the time and wasn't, really rowdy, I was a good little girl. But I had struggles, I had challenges. I had a very uneven profile. My reading scores were through the roof, but math, I was really struggling. Nobody really talked about that stuff back then. We wanted everyone to have even profiles. Everyone's supposed to be doing the same and learning at the same rate and all of this stuff. So that was very upsetting to people. They were very upset about my uneven profile. And so they labeled me very lazy in math, and that I was manipulative and dramatic and all of these things. But in fact, what ended up happening is that I have dyscalculia, which is a learning disability in math. But what I left with was a real self-esteem problem, right? Instead of a learning disability. So I had sort of a challenging growing up. There was always an it that we were looking to name that just never really got named.
Okay. So then at what point did you start thinking, hey, this might be something else that, kind of pursuing, I guess that ultimately what you got was an autism diagnosis?
Well, it wasn't a direct shot there. It was a lot of this, this misdiagnosis, mismedication, then feeling worse because you don't need the medication that they're giving you. And it was a lot of cyclical stuff going on. But what it became was I became a young adult who didn't trust adults. I didn't trust doctors. I didn't trust people in authority. I didn't trust really anybody. And so at about 24 years old, I went to one last therapist who in my 145-minute appointment told me that I had early onset schizophrenia at 24. Well, at 24, it's not early onset schizophrenia anymore. It's just schizophrenia. And also you can't diagnose that in one session, right? You can't in one 45-minute session give someone a diagnosis. So that was my last straw. That was it for me.
Okay.
And I didn't really go seek any other help after that. So what I had was I had just really settled and sort of succumbed to a very unhappy, angry existence that I just had to survive. And I really thought, I was the only one like me. I was very isolated. I really kept up a lot of boundaries after a while and things like that. So I was not a very happy, productive person.
Right.
During that period. But at about 33 years old, I had a really big kind of issue at work. And I had my first real big burnout episode, which is something that's super common for autistics who are not diagnosed.
Right.
If you get all the way to adulthood and you haven't received a diagnosis, chances are you've had burnout. And so I basically kind of just gave up. And I am an only child to a single mom. And I crawled back to my childhood bedroom. And for 3 years, I was homebound and suicidal. For 3 years, the only thing keeping me from actually committing suicide is the fact that I was an only child to a single mom. Right. And the thought of her finding me was more distressing than just laying and being a breathing dead person.
Yes.
So I disconnected from everything. Me, my TV, and my bed. And then I've always had migraines my whole life. And I sort of had a change in my migraines. And that change, I had always been told, journal it, all of this stuff. And so when that happened, I was sort of having a smell that no one else could identify or smell. So I was journaling about it. Is it a new precursor to my migraines? What's going on? Right. And then eventually, as a homebound person, I went to WebMD to do some researching. And I found scary things there, like olfactory hallucinations and olfactory tumors and pituitary tumors and all kinds of frightening things. And so I decided to head over kind of to Wikipedia and go there instead. And there I found sensory processing disorder, which was really like mind-blowing to me because it was something I'd been complaining about my whole life, that lights were painful, certain sounds, and I was just more sensitive to things than other people, right? I could smell things people couldn't smell and hear things they couldn't hear, and stuff like that. And so here it was, like there was an explanation for it. And I was like, wow, so here's this thing that I've been struggling with my whole life, and people have been invalidating it my whole life, right? The lights are too bright. No, they're not. Right. It hurts my eyes. No, it doesn't. Right. So constant invalidation of that experience. So here it was a validation. And at the bottom of it was a link to Asperger's syndrome. At the time, we don't use Asperger's syndrome anymore, but at the time it was still part of our diagnoses. Yep. And so I read that and felt like I had stumbled on my biography. It was the first time that I felt heard or seen or understood in this Wikipedia entry, this generalized nonsense on the internet. And so I showed it to my mom and we pursued a diagnosis. So very much my diagnosis saved my life. And if it had not come into my life at that time, I don't know how many more years I would have laid there, right?
So gosh, what a journey. So you know, I don't know if you see this emotional scale behind me, but we use it quite a bit. And so where you lived up until that time was a lot of red zone. So red zone is the bottom tier. You've got yellow, you got green. Red zone is just in a place of, anger and frustration and worry. And it sounds like you even got to despair.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's a hopelessness. That's the feeling, right? It's a solitary hopelessness. Like I'm the only one like me. Nobody can help me. Nobody can understand me. And anytime I reach out for help, it makes it worse.
Yeah.
So
well, I sometimes, and I communicate because I had gotten, as a mom, I had gotten to that place of despair, right? Despair because I had no idea what's going on with my daughter. So it wasn't happening to myself. But in a way it was because, she was so much a part of our life. And I got to the point of seeking like you did, because you were searching, right? So you went out on the internet to try to find some answers, right? And you come across something that then totally connects with you. And so at that point, does it make you feel like, okay, I'm not alone. Okay, I have an answer. I have, what is
It's
the,
not, it doesn't, I don't think it really resonates that you're not alone right away. That takes a little bit of time
okay,
to realize that there are other people like you. In that moment, what it feels like is, have you ever had like a really long standing argument with somebody for your whole life, and then something comes along and it proves that you're right? And you just are like, I was right. And you just want to like have a party about it. That's what it was like. It was so validating that all the experience that I had had, even though I didn't use the words they were using, I had described those experiences over the years. I had lived those experiences. I could understand all of that, right? And that was like, see, somebody that was like, see, I can show you. I have a piece of paper
yeah,
that proves to you that what you're telling me was not the truth, was actually the truth the whole time.
right.
And so, because I had mistrusted the world so much, by the time I hit my diagnosis, I didn't trust myself either. And so, I really needed a lot of outside reinforcement, right? There was a lot of, okay, but maybe I'm not autistic. How do you know? And how did they miss it for all this time? And now this is it. And there was a lot of mixed emotions. It's a lot of emotional processing up until, for 4 decades, I thought I knew who I was, right? And now this new identity has just landed in my life, and I have to undo 4 decades worth of trauma and relive the rest of my life, right? And so in that moment, it's very selfish. It's not about whether there are others like you. It's very much like, nah, I told you, like that. And just very validating.
Right.
Like, just that your reality is a reality. It's not to be denied. And that is, I think, the very beginning. That is the emotion that for me came first. It was followed very quickly by hope, which was something I had not had for a very long time.
Yeah.
Hope that something could be different, that something about this would inform something so that it would get better, right? So some part of it would work, whatever was not working, right? Which was something I didn't have before. And so I kind of rolled with that for a little bit. And just kind of, it was a really personal internal journey for a while.
Wow.
Before I was really ready to meet the rest of the world as me with the full identity.
Yeah. Kind of shift some things, right? So we always say the green zone is when you step into hope. Like without hope, it's hard to see anything, right? With hope, at least you have some vision for something to be different or something to kind of come together for you. Right? Something that you desire. Did you have any desires at that time? Did you say, at that point, were you thinking like, what do I want to do? Where do I want to go? What do I want?
I wasn't healthy enough to do that right away. I was like, oh my God, maybe tomorrow I'll want to wake up as me.
Okay.
Like that's where I was.
Like
mentally.
There's a next.
Like, could I get to tomorrow, and maybe when tomorrow I wake up, I won't hate myself. Right. Or I'll hate myself just a little bit less. Right. And that it's because I was that far gone. It was just that many years of trauma, repeated trauma. And so it took a while. It took a while to think about it, even doing anything other than just making sure I could be alive. Right. I wanted to like eat and sleep and get out. Right. You know what I mean? That stuff. I needed those things back because that desire had been long gone. To even just participate in the world as a human. So I had to do a lot of that stuff first before there was a recognition that I could get healthy enough to then make my life look like something I loved, right? Like that glimmer of hope was just enough to get me to tomorrow. Right. Or the next tomorrow, until things started working out. So, for example, I had spent the greater portion of my life from 9 to 24 seeing various therapists and taking various medications and therapy every week and blah, 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 right? And none of it ever worked. And here you had to take someone and say to them again, well, here's a therapist for you to go to, right? I mean, that's what we do. Here's your diagnosis. Here's some books to read. So you don't have much. So here's some books to read. And here's a therapist who kind of knows about autism and adulthood. Here.
Yes.
And so basically it was like, so you want me to trust another person in this seat yet again? Wow. Okay. Well, I had to take that leap of faith, because it turns out that when you see a therapist about the thing that is actually the thing that you need help with, it actually works. So therapy doesn't work if you're not with the right therapist, or you're not doing the right kind of therapy, or you're working from a wrong diagnosis, right? It will never work in those scenarios. But when it's the correct diagnosis and the correct therapist and the correct connection, right? Therapy works miraculously. So someone who would never go, I went weekly or bi-weekly for 6 years.
Wow.
Okay, straight. That's what therapy can do when it's the right, right?
Yes.
So there was a lot of that stuff going on. And I needed to kind of, each one of us, when we get a late in life diagnosis, has to agree to get on the journey. Like, you're in that moment, you get a diagnosis. You have two choices, which is one, to do nothing, right? And say, I was always disabled my whole life. Nobody helped me the whole time. Now I'm going to be disabled for the rest of my life. I'm not doing anything. Give me my SSDI. Everybody do everything for me.
Right.
And sit back, right? No wonder it's been so hard for me. You owe me now, right? That's one choice. And the other option is to see the glimmer of hope and say, well, if I go down that lane and it actually does help me, that'll be awesome. And if it doesn't, I can turn right around and do option A, right? Yeah. So as a logical autistic person, that's what my brain did. And I was like, okay, well, then I'm going to take the risk because my backup plan is real easy. And I've done that before. I know how to do that real easy. I could do that. And it was just that. So it was like these little steps of, okay, I'll take that risk and sit in a therapist's office one more time. Okay, I'll try on this diagnosis one more time, right? Because I had so much trauma surrounding medical professionals that it was a huge step for me to take, to be that vulnerable one more time.
Right.
And so that's kind of really my beginning. I wasn't ready to meet other autistic people till, like about a year and a half in even.
Okay. So what advice would you give to somebody who's just getting a diagnosis now in hindsight? What would you tell them?
If you are just getting a formal diagnosis, or you have self-diagnosed, which is equally valid, in adulthood at least, I really recommend two things. One, use your autism to your advantage. We are information seekers by nature. We love research. We love to learn new things. We love all of that stuff. And these days there is a plethora of really good information about autism out there. So use that part of your brain, go and learn what you can about it, because you're going to be learning the secrets of yourself, right? Not all of them will apply to you, but you'll find the ones that do along that journey, right? So that's part of it. The other thing is to seek community. And what that means to you is a really personal thing. For some people, it's just making sure they go to conferences once a year. For some people, it's doing something with an autistic organization every day or every week, right? It's different for everybody what community is, but attach yourself in some way, right? Be a part of kind of our past and our future as a community. And just get to know our history, because there's a lot of things that we can be angry about. But if we take a step back and look at it from a historical perspective, we have to remember we were a community of nothing that's going on a growth spurt right now. And like, take your history with you, learn from the past, right? Like, we need to do that stuff too. So I always recommend that. If you really want to find our genuine community, my biggest recommendation is Facebook. It's a really old platform for a lot of people and not everybody wants to be on it. But it is where the beginnings of our community started. It's where the autistic voice began. So if you want to know that part and you want to meet those people and you want to take a less, not that your diagnosis is selfish, but a less kind of centered approach to your diagnosis, and you're ready to incorporate the community, I would start there, because you'll see we can't collect that many people again. I don't know how we'd ever do it. We're all on too many different platforms now. But when Facebook was the only, we were all there. So I say start there, because it's a really genuine and rich community.
True. And there's a lot of people and groups out there that you can connect with for sure. One of the reasons why autism shifts exist, though, it's, obviously it's a shift, right? And just to give you just a little bit of information about what we do is, I started this because of our own daughter, who we got the diagnosis for at the age of 4, Gabby. And of course, at that time, because she's 24 today. So even then I thought, gosh, we knew very little about autism. So I can't imagine even further back that, not getting a good diagnosis, you know, even at our point was kind of a rare thing. You know, people were not even getting
It's
diagnosed.
rare as a woman, right? We know that. So we know the beginnings, again, historically, white boy, non-speaking, behavior problem in classroom. Already our numbers are askew.
Right.
Already we've started in a terrible place.
Yeah.
Right. So we've not included anybody of any other cultures. We've not included any other genders, nothing. And we're always looking for someone like 8 or below too. That's the other thing. That was the other piece of it. So anybody who's like in 5th or 6th grade, nope. Anybody, right? So we just threw the baby out with the bathwater, and that was the whole deal. We now know we're so wrong, right? We know that autism looks a lot of different ways, and it doesn't just have one presentation. And you know, it happens pretty much, I think, when we get our numbers right, we'll find it's probably an even split between men and women on the spectrum. I think right now we look at really skew numbers. Any numbers we have, just for public sake, are at least 8 years old. That's how research does its thing. So by the time you see it, it's an 8-year-old number, right? And so if you start counting 8 years ago and 8 years before that, right? So we've been counting boys for a very long time.
Yes, I know.
And so we have to get our numbers right. And the only way we're going to get that right is by fixing the gender bias in our diagnostics, because that's already, the diagnostics are set up with a certain presentation in mind, correct? So when an adult who's on the spectrum walks into an evaluator's office and can fake eye contact, we've had more women dismissed out of a diagnosis because they made eye contact for 5 seconds.
Yep.
Sorry, I was like constantly told my whole life that if you're not looking at me, you're not paying attention. So I freaking learned how to pay attention the way you need me to, and now I'm getting punished for it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so that's where we are with our numbers. That will change. All of it is on its way to changing, but everything takes time, right? So we have work to do to get the right number.
Don't we? As a community, we have some work to do, because, you know, one of the things that I found is that when I was looking at autism and from the old perspective, right, I suffered, and our daughter suffered, honestly, because as we look at it from the old perspective, we're looking at the challenges related to the diagnosis, you know, and we're looking at everything as a challenge, right? I remember when I started researching autism, it was just all challenge. So no wonder parents today, when they get the diagnosis, it can be like a death sentence, right? Because all you see is challenges. So the shift starts coming when we really start to see it from a whole new perspective. And what we were considering challenges is actually so much beauty and so much, you know, value and so much talent and ability and just a different way of being in this world, which is teaching. I know it's taught me so much, and it's teaching us so much. It's an expansion of our, you know, of our world. And yet, you know, again, a lot of us within the autism community are still in the red zone about it. And so I love to talk to shifters like you who have been in the red zone. You were kind of there at the very bottom. And luckily, with letting go of some resistance, you were able to get yourself to, you know, to the green zone.
Yeah, and it's about
a clean place, you know.
I think for autistics, it's about retaking control of our lives, the choices that are made for us, you know, that stuff. And so I think rightly so, there's a good amount of anger in the community. I think it's a healthy anger. It becomes unhealthy to me when it stops us from moving forward as a community, right? When it goes beyond, let me just express to you why I'm angry, and rightfully so. And then everyone's, you're right to be angry. And we can now, how do we, right? Like, but we're stuck a little bit. Right, in the anger place right now, and it is rightly so, but it also at a point becomes unuseful, right? Like in anybody's life, if you're an angry person and you're trying to build a successful life, you will only get so far because your anger will begin to hold you back, right? We just know that that is fact, right? And so what we need to do is take more control over how we choose to respond to things and where we choose to put our energy, because that is something that you can control, right? You can't control other people's responses. You can't control what other people do with their companies or their businesses or how they choose to speak. You cannot control those things.
Right.
But you control how you respond to those things, and you can control
right.
how you speak, and you can control how you educate about that and how you correct people like that, right? You can control all of those things, right? And so letting go of the things outside of your control and letting go of the anger, because a lot of the anger comes from feeling powerless about it. Right. So if we can stop feeling powerless about it and take power somewhere else, right, and feel empowered in another area, we don't have to waste energy on the anger all the time. And that to me too was a personal decision. I had to do a lot of that thing that is so hard, which is forgiving people who have never apologized to you. Right? Really hard to let that go. Here are people throughout my life who traumatized me and did horrible, horrible things for me and will never come to terms with it. They will probably go to their deathbed never knowing they even did this thing.
Right.
It completely destroyed me.
Yeah.
Right? And I had to learn to forgive them for it and let it go because the anger wasn't serving me.
Yeah.
It wasn't helping me to move forward. I wasn't waking up and feeling better. I was just waking up and feeling angry. And, that wasn't working for me. And so I had to learn that wasting all of this energy in areas I have no control is a waste of my time.
Yeah.
And it's for me, it's become kind of a mantra, and it's sort of how I live my life. For example, I don't follow politics anymore.
Yeah.
I can't do a blessed thing about anything these people are going to do and the other people with money and the constituents. And I have no control over that, right? There's no way. Right? If they're in office, the control is in them, right? So sitting around and being angry about it all the time serves me no purpose. It just makes me miserable and does zero zip to them, right? And so I had to take those things out of my life, right? I had to kind of remove those things because I wanted better than that. I wanted to know if there was another choice.
Oh, that's great, Becca. I love what you're saying. And, again, there's people listening that obviously, especially within the autism community, that, can really take away a lot of the things that you've said and apply them to their own life. So what we teach is, hey, if you're in fear or despair or powerlessness, which is the bottom rung, anger does feel so much better because you're taking some control back,
Right.
At least it puts you in a place of control, but it's not staying there. It's moving past it, using that to fuel you to do something, to take action, right? Which is what you did. You took some action. You said, hey, I don't want to stay in this place. So tell me then, what happens then? You go through years of therapy. At what point do you decide, hey, I just really want to be an advocate and really kind of help others within this community?
Well, it was sort of parallel journey, right? I started out by volunteering in nonprofit organizations as a payback. Like you were here to answer the phone for me. I want to be there to answer the phone for somebody else concept, right?
Yeah.
But as I did it, it turned out I was good at it. And then it turned out I kind of liked it. And then I kind of liked the people I was volunteering with. And then they kind of wanted to hire me. So they hired me. And, it was like that kind of journey while simultaneously, once a week, I was going to therapy and processing my own diagnosis, right? And so I did nonprofit for a while. And then I reached a point in my own evolution, I guess, where I was just tired of carrying their mission statement when I went to go speak somewhere, right? I had things to say. I'm a New Yorker. I was born and raised there. I curse sometimes when I'm talking about things, and it's terrible to do when you're representing an organization, but I just wanted to be me, right? I didn't want to have to represent anybody anymore. I just wanted to be me for a while. So I went out on my own and I started my own consulting company, and I do a whole bunch of things in that arena. And that's sort of where I'm at in my advocacy. And at the same time, right, I'm still processing my therapy and I'm learning all about myself and living through a bunch of really crappy things in my life at the same time, right? But learning how to get through crappy things differently and better and, responding differently, right? And understanding that a life of trauma has given me a resilience that cannot be matched by anybody else. Like I get up better than anybody I know because I've gotten up so many damn times. Like that's just the truth of it. And so as I was doing this, I was really on a personal mindfulness journey that started with my therapist and kind of went on its own thing. So I talk a lot about how we don't have much for autistic adults out in the world.
Right.
We are seeing a nice good push now of autistic adults creating their own stuff. But for a while, it's just been a void.
Yeah.
Giant void of nothingness.
Yep.
And so I had to do stuff outside of the community for my mental health, right? That wasn't autism based. Because I'm not a kid, and that's where all the supports were for children. So I had to do something else. So what we do in adulthood that is like that in childhood is called self-help or personal development, right? You do, if you're feeling like you need spiritual growth or help in employment or stuff, you get a life coach and you do personal development, and right. So that was the journey I was on. What job did I really want to do? What kind of career did I want to have? Where did I want to live that works for me, right? Somebody who had, one of my greatest challenges with my autism is sensory processing issues. Okay. And I lived and grew up in New York City, like Queens and the Bronx, not upstate New York.
Right. A lot of sensory stuff going on.
In the city, right? And I had to travel into Manhattan and out of Manhattan for work every day. Okay. That is essentially a sensory nightmare. So my migraines that I was having all of that time were actually sensory overload headaches that were being medicated as migraines sometimes, right? And so I'm going through this mindfulness journey, which is about reattaching yourself to the present. Like, hey, be mindful and be present of your body, your own personal needs, your environment that you're in, how you're feeling, right? And those were all things I had disconnected after years of being invalidated, right? Obviously, my natural state was wrong. Everyone was telling me I was wrong. So don't do your natural stuff. Cut that off and do the opposite was the rule, right? So you disconnect from whether you have to go to the bathroom or eat, or whether, you know, the environment is too overloady for you, or whether you've ignored all of those things and you're just doing for other people's comfort. Right. You are uncomfortable 98% of the time for everybody else's comfort.
Yeah.
Okay. And that is not a good place to live.
Not a great way to live. No.
And those were the things I needed to work on. So mindfulness attached me to that connection. I got to reattach to, wait a second, why am I sitting in this room with my glasses on when I really need my sunglasses? Oh, because I'm worried they'll feel weird if I have my sunglasses on.
Right.
Well, I stopped caring if they felt weird.
Yeah.
I started wearing my sunglasses. Right. And that was those were the things I had to start to integrate into my life through this mindfulness journey. But the thing is that anything in terms of self-help and personal development is all by neurotypicals for neurotypicals. So there was a lot of books out there on it, but not really for me. So once again, I was picking through, you know, books and things for the stuff that worked for me, and it wasn't directed toward me. And it was really frustrating. And what I noticed as I went through The Secret and The Four Agreements and You Are a Badass and all of the other books out there was that there were about 5 or 6 lessons that every single one of them repeated through all of the books. 5 or 6 a day. Had some that were different, but these ones were repeated. And the autistic brain goes, I see a pattern, ding, 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 right? And so as people who don't want, you know, we're not even meat and potatoes people. We're just meat people. Don't even give me the potatoes, right? And so I needed to clear through that clutter to get at what I needed in there. Yeah. And through their metaphors and their fancy language and all of that. And what I did was sort of journal along the way and keep notes along the way and all of that stuff. And at the end of it, I was like, man, this is what we need as an autistic adults. We need just these 5, 6, 7 things, and we need them presented in a very neat way without potatoes, and in a way that we can digest and a way that we can afford.
Yeah.
Right. And so I went about on that kind of journey. And so until I was sort of doing that and wanting to, I did a lot. And how can I make that time period shorter or easier for other people? Can I give them like a cheat sheet to it?
Yeah.
You know? And so that's what I was sort of creating on the back burners of like real life. And then COVID hit and all of my speaking engagements were gone and everything. We were sitting home doing nothing. And it was the perfect time to make it a course and make it out there so that people could take it. And so now that's what it is. It's called Self-Defined Living. And it's a path to a quality autistic life. And it is a 3-unit long virtual course that you go through of just the meet with me about what it is that you need to rethink about and kind of retrain your brain about, the skills that you need to create a life you don't need a vacation from, and then the management tools you need to sustain that so that you can kind of move out of that red zone survival place, white knuckling life to a really thriving place where your life looks like your own life, not like somebody else's.
Right. the shoes fit right for you. And
Mm-hmm.
start living in your own shoes, right? And feel comfortable in those shoes, because I think so there's just so much discomfort with being on the autism spectrum. And we work with a lot of adults with autism, and it's just a sense of something's not right, or I'm not okay. And I think part of the process, and the process it sounds like you've gone through with just self-awareness, self-awareness and mindfulness and being in the moment, was everything's okay right here and now. Like, I'm okay. All is well, right? And I think that's such a, great shift in the journey, and just being comfortable and self-loving and self-accepting of who you are. To me, that's one of the big journeys of autism, because I think for a community that we embrace the community as a whole, we embrace ourselves, but we embrace our children. There's so much more that can happen. And I think that's a big part of creating a shift. I kind of equate sometimes our community to the LGBTQ. It's kind of like, if we're not feeling good about ourselves, if we're disempowered, if we're behind the curtain, we're not disclosing because we're embarrassed about it, we're never going to be empowered to create the life we want for ourselves or for others within the community. You are like,
right. And I think you're 100% on point, right? We are paralleling the LGBTQ community if you look at it from a civil rights perspective. Right. When it stops being a disability conversation and it starts being a conversation about culture, about autistic culture, and we're talking about more about how autism exists in adulthood, right? And that we're around and we can do things. We currently, our environment, as much as we shout about inclusion, our environment isn't yet inclusive. Even in the autism community, I know plenty of professionals and clinicians that will not come out about their autism in the autism community.
Oh, yeah.
Right? For fear of people no longer taking them seriously.
Right.
Why? Because there's a stigma around autism, right? And so we still are we're still there. But when we look at the LGBTQIA community, what we see in their history is exactly where we are right now. And what followed this piece of anger that we're in right now is reclaiming our language, taking back our words. You don't get to tell me autism is a bad word. You don't get to tell me I can't call myself autistic. You don't get to tell me that that's a bad word. You don't get to tell me I'm ashamed about that. You don't get to tell me about my reality anymore.
Yeah.
Right. And when we get there, right, I think people will begin to understand that we have a culture, much like there is deaf culture and blind culture. There is most definitely autistic culture.
Right.
And we need to get there. And that's where we're at in the journey.
That's the shift, and that's the journey we're on as well. So I'm just, I'm excited when I connect with we call you a shifter, because you have shifted from, here to here, empowerment, right? Self-understanding, self-awareness, and the ability to create the life that you choose, not that anybody else chooses for you. So I think the more people within the autism community that get to this point where you have gotten to, and kind of propel themselves to whatever they want to do, whatever they choose to do. And we're seeing more people within the autism community having success in any area, because right now we're still kind of focused on, love the companies that are hiring people for IT and for,
right.
But after a while you go, oh my gosh, people
we can do other things
in every field doing everything, right?
I mean, I think it would be so funny if we had a moment where every person that was autistic just kind of like put a sticker on their head, and everybody in their offices had to look around at all the people who are, forget autism, who are neurodivergent in their offices.
Yeah.
Right. And it would be an awakening, right? Of like, wait, oh, so you've been here this whole time. Yeah. You just didn't want to hear about it. Right. And that's the difference. We were really in a place of the autistic voice was silenced for many years because we thought it was a kid's problem. Yeah. Right. So we weren't looking for adults who can give you a really, articulate, breakdown of their experience. We're talking about children who can't tell if they want ice cream or a cookie right now. Right. And so that's where the autistic experience was being understood through that child lens, and then the parent lens. because that's what we were looking at. We weren't looking at the adults that these children became, right? And where are they, right? And what's happening to them, and how are they surviving or not surviving?
Yeah.
Right? Because we know the years of it being this way have kind of, without the autistic voice being represented, have left us really suicidal as a group.
Yes.
Our life expectancy is between 36 and 54 years, the average autistic adult.
Yeah.
Two things play a part in it. One is mental health. Mental health is not autism, it is separate. We have mental health disorders like anybody else with a brain. We get mental health disorders. So I have autism and depression. I got my depression because of the stigma and trauma around autism, but nonetheless, not related. And so we have really, we go into some really dark places, right? And we see a lot of suicide. The other thing is we don't trust medical professionals or people in authority as a group. And so when we're sick, we don't want to go. It's really hard to communicate in a doctor's office. They are very not understanding in the medical office about autism at all, especially in adulthood. And so we don't go. We don't call for the appointment. And then by the time we're in writhing pain and we have cancer throughout our whole body, there's nothing anybody can do, and we die, right? And so we're looking at that life expectancy, and what that is about is quality of life.
Right.
There is none right now. There is no quality of life for autistic adults. And because there is none, that's what we're seeing is this life expectancy.
Yeah. And where it starts is us as a community. And so, the fact is that we've got to shift our own perspectives around autism as a community first. Sometimes we expect the outside community to do it first. We look at the unemployment rates, and yes, they're 80, 90%. We're approaching businesses about hiring our population, but really it should be us within the community creating that for our own community.
Well, it's because it's not. Right now, it's been a very one-sided deal. That's just the way that it's been. There's been a lot less reciprocation than there should be in the autism community in general, right? Autistics will give 150% and do 4 interviews with you if you need us to do 4 interviews to get a job. But we can't get employers to open their minds about what it means to change their interview process a little bit to accommodate that, right? So because they don't want to, they're not meeting us halfway, we're doing all the work, right? And what we need is reciprocation from the other side. Like, I can't make inclusion. You have to want me there, right? I can't make it. You have to say you're welcome. That's what inclusion is, right? And so that's kind of where we're stuck. And how, getting out of that is, it is this shift, and we need more people to kind of make the crossover. And that takes time again, and it takes proper information going out, and it takes proper people representing the community and all of those things, right? And the biggest of all is education, right? That when we're presented with someone who is miseducated about the topic, that we don't eat their faces off. That we kindly say, oh, I'm going to teach you something so that when you know better, you do better. Here's the deal. Absolutely. Right? And when we do that, you have someone who not only has a willingness to learn that, but then will probably pass that on to somebody else. Right? And that's how we spread that shift. Right? Is saying, not doing, everyone should know this about neurodiversity already thing, right? And say, no, every opportunity is an opportunity to educate. And what you're in control of in that situation is your option to educate. You can either choose to educate, choose to do nothing, right? Or get into a giant fight with somebody. But that's the piece you're in control of, right? And what you choose to respond.
Well, I think, Becca, you and I are very aligned with with our thought process, and probably trying to do some similar things. You are really on a path to empower people with autism. It sounds like you have a new course. Obviously, when it starts opening up, it's great to have you go out and speak and educate. People can reach you at Becca, Becca, Lory, LoryHector.com. So
It's just BeccaLory.com. Before I was married, I got my website.
Okay,
So
that's
it's
right.
just,
That's right. I'm sorry, I
it's
added
just
the heck.
BeccaLory.com.
I
And
added the heck
everything is there.
that I
It's all there on the website. So
Becca
the
Lory.
course, I do seminars now that are sort of one-off things. I have two live streams a week, and I do YouTube, and there's endless free resources on my website. So please be availed of them. Go ahead and take advantage.
Well, we'd love to direct
I
people
want it to be available.
Yeah, we would love to kind of direct people to all these sites, your site, all the great people that are doing this work, because again, sharing as much in terms of what resources are available is going to be so important for our community, and that we have resources that we can tap into to help ourselves shift, right? Yeah. So that's the key. So what's next for you? What do you think? Well, I guess are you taking it day by day in your mindfulness practice, or do you have some aspirations?
I've learned a lot about setting goals, and I've learned a lot about how far you can set goals and how specific. So a lot of what happened to me in the last year was not something I had control over. It was COVID. It was a pandemic, right? And I sort of chose to respond to the pandemic by putting this course out there, which I was otherwise petrified to do because it was my baby, right? And I didn't want to Yes. And so that was a really big thing for me to put it out there. And I've gotten so much response from it that all that my brain and body wants to do is to build off of that. So I have endless ideas of things that I want to do related to the course and personal development for adults on the spectrum. Like I want to do a nighttime affirmations book that we can, read before we go to bed, and, little things that just kind of build off of the course itself. So if you're someone who's taken it, you can continue to add things in, right? And it doesn't just end after the course. So that's where this part of my brain is focused. But that's not where the money comes from for me. I'm very Robin Hood about life. I try to take as much as I can from the consulting, speaking side of life, from the big organizations and the large corporations that need training and that kind of stuff, and offer my stuff at a very, very low cost to the community because of our unemployment problem.
Right.
So if you think that what I'm doing is cool, the best way to support me and what I'm doing actually is to become a sponsor. Okay. What I do is I have a sponsorship set up on the webpage. It's a whole link. And I allow people to sponsor the scholarships for the course for autistic adults, because most of the adults that need it are unemployed and or underemployed and can't afford to pay the money for something that they very much need. Right? And so what I do is I ask that the people and professionals that have been servicing our community for a very long time and having their paychecks paid, that they donate a little bit of money directly towards this, and to allow, I do one-on-one scholarships. The course costs $240. You send me $240, someone's taking the course for free, right? It's a one-on-one deal. I give them out as they come in. So first come, first serve. I keep a wait list, because if the course is the thing that you need, that's going to be the thing that gets you employed, right? How do you solve that problem? You have to solve it. You need an outlet. You want to get out, I'm going to give you a way out, but I can't then charge you up the wazoo for it. I have to make it accessible, right? Or otherwise it's a useless tool.
Right.
So I wanted that to happen. And it did. It's happened a few times. And now those people who are now employed or are more comfortable in their lives and their financial situations are now sponsoring other people to take the course, right? And so, if you think that it's interesting and you think that I should keep doing it, and or you want to encourage other people to create their resources, please feel free to go ahead and sponsor. You do get things for it. I'm working on things other than publicity things, but I'm trying. So yeah, and that's sort of where I'm at. And so in terms of where I want to see that go, well, in my head, if I let it go far enough, somebody like Brene Brown is introducing me to an audience of a room of people, right? I'd eventually like a book to come out of it. I want to leave something behind as a resource, right? So that nobody else has to start from scratch again. Right? I read so many books that ended with diagnosis, and there was nothing about what now. Like, you got your diagnosis and now what? Yeah. So I created a now what. It's not perfect. I want someone to do better. I'm just trying to start something, right? I just something in the void of nothing, right? And so, yeah, I would love to see that. I would love to see other people creating their things, or, you know, to see the people who've sat through my course having a thriving life and doing things with their thriving life.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
where
that's the win,
starts,
right?
Yeah.
I don't have kids. I have lots of animals. And so that's going to be my legacy, whatever I choose to leave the planet with. And I will let it grow as big as it gets.
No,
Really.
that's beautiful. Well, hopefully we could be a part of, you know, again, expanding the message that you're sharing, and the services that you're offering. I think it's beautiful, and I'm just so excited and honored to meet you. And I commend you for all the great work that you're doing, and taking, you know, your personal hardships and turning them into so much success, not only for yourself, but just so many others. So thank you so much for joining us today. What a pleasure. What an interesting story you have. And I will continue to follow you and your progress. And hopefully, I'm a big believer that once you put something out there, like a book and Brene Brown, that it's going to happen. So I trust that your path will continue.
Well, I talk about manifestation in my course, right? And so it's the hope. You put it out there. If you don't say it or you don't ask for it, the answer will always be no. And so you have to
put it out into the universe, right?
Right, like somebody who's sitting on a whole bunch of wealthy money that somebody gave to them is going to be watching this video and will say, yes, everyone should take this course.
Yes, absolutely. I love it. I'm going to be right aligned with you. Well, Thank you, Becca. We'll be following up and sending you a link for this. But thank you all today for listening in. And again, just tuning into another shifter, creating a better life for the autism community and herself, which is what it's all about, is us living our life on purpose. And so again, thank you for being here, and continued success for you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Have a great day.
You too.
Bye-bye.